AI pipeline, and he actually works at Google. So that's going to be quite interesting. Franz, the floor is yours.
Perfect.
Franz, your camera is off. Just so you know, I did just pass you the presenter privilege.
Do you see your option to share your screen?
Are you with us, Franz? We heard you for a minute, I believe.
Oh my, technology. You just gotta love it, huh? Xander, maybe if you try to demote and promote again, Franz, it will reset the privileges.
Sure, I can do that. So it won't let me even demote him to attendee. I think there's something going on with his connection right now.
Okay.
So I'll be watching and seeing if he comes in again, perhaps.
I guess we should have let him speak when he was allowed.
Seize the opportunity, right? Well, I think he's connected with both the computer and the phone, so maybe there's something going on there.
I don't know, for Dr. Bremer, maybe she can save the file as a PDF, then it might be a much smaller file that she could email in the worst case scenario.
Yeah, great idea.
Bremer, are you here?
Yes, I'm here.
Can you do it PDF file?
Yeah, I am sending. I'm trying to send the file.
Okay, okay. Yeah.
It never happens. I've used this platform many times, so I'm just wondering what's happening here.
So real quick, this is Evan Sickler. I'm assisting Xander here. It might be on your Mac. There's something called Mission Control. Are you familiar with that?
No.
Okay. You can either swipe with 3 fingers on your touchpad. I'm assuming you're on a laptop.
Yes, I think.
So if you swipe with 3 fingers, swipe up, it should kind of give you a layout of all your different applications that are open.
Yes.
And then do you have something that shows like desktop 1, desktop 2, desktop 3, and so forth?
Not really.
You don't? Okay. It was worth a shot.
Maybe you can present it without pictures. Okay. Yeah. Without her. Can you do that, Xander?
What was that, Robbie?
we can just present it without her video on, only the screen. In the interest of time, I think that will be better.
Do you mean me present her content from my computer?
Although she can present herself, only thing we will not be able to see her video. But we will
I don't think that was working.
But screen, you can see the screen, right? No.
I could see her desktop background image, but that was all. I couldn't see any windows or any content she was.
I see.
So I think, are you still working on emailing it to me, Dr. McKee?
Yes.
Okay.
Xander, can you re-promote Franz to a panelist? Because I see he has the little camera icon again.
He may have left and come back. So yeah. Franz, are you with us again?
I'm back.
You're back. You want to jump in and do the presentation here?
I can, yes.
Okay.
I appreciate it. Yeah,
Wonderful.
I'm passing you presenter privilege.
All right.
So take over whenever you're ready, and we'll be working on the next one.
Okay. All right, folks, let me know when you see my screen.
We see it now.
Okay, well, perfect. Well, folks, thank you. Good afternoon, and thank you for thinking of Google and allowing us to share a little bit of time with you all this morning. I had an opportunity to hear and listen to a bunch of the speakers this morning, and super insightful. It's exciting to see and hear some of the great minds that the university is cultivating and some of the great partnerships that you guys have across the industries. So today, I'm joined with Naresh Jasotani. Naresh is an AI machine learning specialist with Google. I am part of Google as well, and I represent our healthcare business. And between Naresh and I, we want to share with you, a little bit of what we call Google AI data pipelines. And from an AI data pipelines perspective, how we can help enable clinical research, research studies, and programs across both the clinical setting side, the university setting side, as well as public institutions that are out there, big corporations, big companies. So that said, only have 30 minutes with you guys, so I'm really going to touch on a handful of subjects, but towards the end, I'm going to leave with you a good deal of content to further the education and the exploration of Google tools. But more importantly, you're going to have two documents that our university friends are going to share with you. One of which is the Practical Guide for Healthcare Life Sciences, the AI platform pipeline I'm going to touch on here today. And inside of that document, you'll have the ability to really touch and feel the pipeline, gain access to a lot of the tools, as well as the publicly available data sets around COVID, around cancer research, around gene research, and several other research programs that we've cultivated from a Google perspective. And you're also going to get a second document that highlights an overall adoption framework. And that document is super important because it helps you take some of the technologies, the tools, and the techniques and apply it to your bodies of work. Apply it to the institutions that you work for, or even look at applying it to some of the ideas that you may have and birth with it the use of AI and machine learning solutions. So really 3 areas that I want to specifically cover. So I'll talk a little bit about Google Cloud for Healthcare. Then I'll go right into a vaccine research flow from a Google perspective and the use of Google tools and the applicability of AI and machine learning. And the example use case there I'm going to touch on is COVID-19. I'm going to jump right into operationalizing the pipeline. Because of the limited time, I'm not really going to talk through what the actual components are of the pipeline, but I am going to show you screenshot and pictures and maybe touch on the technologies that enable that pipeline. And I'll provide references at the end to provide more detail in terms of how to use those technologies. And at the end, I'm going to talk a little bit about collaboration and research and additional tools that are available for you to help with further education, accelerate grant programs, go after publicly and privately available grant options that are out there for you as well. Okay, so let's jump right into it. Healthcare here at Google has been a priority for many years. So we've made it part of our mission to work with organizations across the globe to really drive access to quality care and improve health outcomes in communities around the world. To that end, As a company, we've made several investments around how to leverage data to provide better insights. The application of AI and machine learning technologies to really surface up leading-edge solutions. And some of the solutions which I'll touch on here today is the creation of these AI and machine learning data pipelines that are available publicly with deep embedded technologies that you can leverage from the open system community. When we think about when COVID-19 hit our shores and the early onset of COVID-19 globally, as an organization, Google really began to move quickly. And we moved quickly around how do we help partner with the communities that we serve to enable the use of the data that these communities are generating to really find solutions to help combat COVID-19. Some of the examples here, I touch on major institutions that have really leveraged some of the, again, the pipelines that I'll talk about here shortly, but other tools across the industry that are freely available that Google helped collaborate with partners of ours across the industry and implement them into the action. A couple maybe I'll call out here real quick would be the National Response Portal. From a National Response Portal perspective, that visualization interface that HCL Healthcare has put together is available for public consumption. But the importance of this database or this portal gives us the opportunity to take over 50 or so publicly available data sets that are COVID-19 specific, as well as hundreds of healthcare system data sets across the United States, consolidated into a highly secure, highly compliant type platform to be able to create visualization as well as some predictability of the spread of COVID and other areas of prediction that we've built into the dashboard itself. The other company I maybe want to touch on here is Schrödinger. Schrödinger is a bit more specific to the pipeline I'm going to share, where they've been able to leverage our pipeline, partner with other companies out there like a Sanofi to evaluate billions and billions and billions of combinations and small-based molecules to understand the route to the creation of new drugs, the creation of the vaccine to combat COVID, and some of the early clinical trials that you're seeing out there from a vaccine usage perspective. The lens and the body of work that these companies are going after really represents petabytes and petabytes of information, multiple data sources, both public and privately available, and a super consolidated type, type data ocean, for lack of a better phrase. So why Google Cloud for Healthcare? I think it's important to surface up that inside of Google, we have many dimensions and many technologies that we've brought to market that are publicly available. And also as part of Google, we have our overall parent company called Alphabet, and underneath Alphabet, we have several sister companies to Google. Sister companies like Google Health, Verily, DeepMind, Google Brain, etc. The importance of Google Cloud and Google Cloud for Healthcare takes into account all of the Alphabet companies' solutions and technologies out there and really compartmentalize it and help drive healthcare-specific solutions. Healthcare-specific solutions in the context to enable clinical research, context to help enable the introduction of AI and machine learning to specific health management, scoring techniques, diagnostic techniques, patient intervention techniques, but also helps with providing resources and assets to manage the full evolution of what the healthcare landscape is moving towards today. And that landscape is really moving towards the ability to integrate AI and machine learning model as a core part of way care is provided across most healthcare systems here globally. So that said, it's important to make sure I highlight a couple of areas before we go into the pipeline. Ownership of data for Google is very important. What that means is the content, the intellectual property you create, the data volumes, and the masses of data that you put out there and you create from the discipline inside of your own control group or your research program, ownership is fundamentally yours. Control is another area where we want to make sure that of the data and the volumes and the bodies of work that you have out there, control is under the stewardship of yourself and your governing bodies. And with that level of control, Google provides a level of built-in protection services and compliance services to make sure that data in flight, data at rest, data in Google systems across the globe are not just secured, compliant, and encrypted, but also meet some of the highest and most rigorous standards of compliance across the industry. So when you think of the complexity of healthcare, think of compliance organizations or compliance requirements like HIPAA, GDPR overseas, GDP in general, right, and so on. Okay. So I want to make sure I set the framework and the context before I go into talking about the vaccine flow data pipeline around what if. What if, as you think through your bodies of work and you think through your core research and you think about the organizations that you work for, what if we can help you unlock the potential of your data, accelerate what you're doing from a preclinical trial research and development perspective, accelerate what you're doing with drug discovery, accelerate what you're doing with some advanced gene therapies and gene therapy techniques. So the intent of what we're doing as an organization is to help you really manage your data and the creation of that data well, but also accelerate what you're doing and the difficult problems you all are trying to solve. So let's get right into it. So vaccine research flow. The intent of our COVID-19 program early on, as I mentioned before, when the outbreak started to hit globally, we really want to create assets very, very quickly. But not just Google-specific project assets. We wanted to make sure that we create assets that are accessible globally, available publicly, and also provide tools out there such that you can layer these tools on top of those data assets to really result in and generate your AI machine learning pipelines appropriately. So as part of those assets, and again, I'll talk about it here shortly, what you'll see is the use of some core technologies from Google. From a data scientist perspective, we have data science notebooks out there that are available publicly for you all to leverage to help with accelerating and understanding and really managing through a lot of the publicly available COVID data bodies of work. Notebooks such as the Terraform data notebook, Jupyter notebooks from a data science perspective, and so on. We'll talk a little bit about blogs as well, especially towards the end, how we're leveraging other call it technologies inside of Google to really surface up the use of natural language processing and natural language understanding to help with managing through and searching a lot of these thousands and thousands and thousands bodies of work that are COVID-19 specific. As clinical researchers or as students or as organizations, how you can really search through these bodies of work very, very quickly, surface of contextual information that's specific to your question, and really find those very quick scholarly articles that could help you move your initiatives forward. Right? I'd like to think, as I sit here and have the conversation with you all, but also as I look at my day-to-day activity, that the work we do, the technologies that we introduce into the environment, the education that we provide to you and your peers out there, we're also able to provide what I'd like to call a lift in adjacent research initiatives. Right? And what that means is, although I'm going to share with you a vaccine data pipeline today, that data pipeline that we, again, publicly released is really available to help with initiating and driving other data pipelines of similar research bodies or maybe even dissimilar research bodies. And towards the end, I'll show you how this same data pipeline can do things like help with the acceleration of drug refactoring, like our friend Dr. Prasidas had talked about here earlier today. Really accelerate the contextual definition of how to identify tumors with certain 3D or 2D dimensional type images. So the pipelines are reusable, they're repeatable, and they're expandable into other bodies of work and available to you all to leverage these. Some sample data sets in terms of what we are able to provide out there and really reference publicly. And a lot of the public data sets here, I'll get into a little bit more later, but a lot of these public data sets are available for you all for consumption, and also the ability to take some of your internal COVID-19 data sets as well and combine those data sets together to result in certain experiments. So, typical machine learning AI analytics. I like to use this, it's kind of a busy slide, but I like to use it to really talk about the flow, right? The flow of data. And from a flow of data perspective, most of the research programs and a lot of the programs and conversations I have with it, during my travels, it really starts on the far left, and that is the understanding the collection of data. I'll argue, and I've really seen different conversations like this across the area, but I'll argue that I would worry less about AI and machine learning and worry more about the data and the relevance of your data and the applicability of your data type going into your system. And I really value Dr. Prasidis' message around there, around cleanliness of data, right? You want to eliminate as much noise as you can to make sure that when you build your AI machine learning models, those models are appropriate to the system that you want to test. But you also challenge the system a little bit. Make it difficult for the system to come to a level of prediction, because it gives you that ability to really refine it, right? Really provide that ability to get to a level of accuracy that's measurable, but a level of accuracy that's super comfortable and well into the 90s. So when I get to the middle slide, middle portion of this deck, once you understand where all these data sources are coming from, you've got to collect it somewhere. And this is where the industry really talks about the use of concepts like a data lake or a data ocean or a data warehouse, the use of big data in general in terms of where you put the content, and to really vanillify that. This area and the ability to store it somewhere is really around how do you take structured data, unstructured data, cleanse it really, really, really quickly, normalize the content, and put it in a system. In this particular instance, BigQuery, put it in a system that you can generate results against it very, very quickly and apply a layer of AI and machine learning against it. So once you're there and you're ready to provide that level of AI and machine learning, there's typically three areas of output. One, you're going to predict it and you're going to put it into another body of storage with the intent of delivering a publicly available application of some type. Second area is typically you're going to create a business intelligence dashboard. And from a business intelligence dashboard perspective, you're going to give yourself the ability to really surface up, what relevant data points that you've pulled from the bodies of data, where you're going from the bodies of data across the enterprise, and I think more so and more importantly, how you're going to start creating these interesting experiments to really refine your model better. And the third area, which we'll talk about here shortly, is really online prediction or streaming prediction, right? Meaning this is where the analysis of data gets to real-time analysis, being able to provide it into a separate system, and in that separate system, generate results real-time, and then very quickly come back and iterate the model and train that model to get that model more accurate as you enter more data into the overall body. Okay, so let's kind of put this in action. So I'm not going to go into the detail around what vaccine design is. I know we're somewhat time sensitive, but when we think about the creation of the model I'm going to share with you here shortly, there are really three things that we want to make sure that we consider as an initial first pass for a handful of experiments. And those three things is when we go after vaccine design is to identify the peptide epitope, right? So that is going to require the use and the analysis of a ton of data. A ton meaning in certain instances petabytes of information, and the petabytes of information are typically going to come in volumes of very, very, very small data sizes. And what's important about that, those data sizes, those data sources are going to come from multiple places. It could be publicly available data from NIH or a sister institution, and even private data that as a university or as a clinical researcher you're generating on your own. We also want to make sure that we provide a binding score. And the prediction of a binding score gives us that level of certainty that the protein binding design that we're identifying, right? When we look at how, the docking mechanisms are working, when we look at the machine learning model, what's that level of effectiveness or that level of accuracy? Meaning, how confident are we that what we're seeing and what we're resulting from the model perspective is accurate? And then, of course, what's a good model, right? So when I go into this model, I talk about this regularly, and we go through a concept called fail fast, right? So from a fail fast perspective, as a researcher, you want to build these systems and build your experiments to test your hypotheses very quickly. And as you test your hypotheses, you want to fail as quickly as you can to get to that result where you're not failing anymore, right? And when you don't fail, now you come to a model that could be, right, the right approach to take as you continue to build out your machine learning environment. The other areas we think about this pipeline that we want to account for, especially with COVID-19, is the mutation of the virus. So I'll touch on a little bit when we think about viral mutations specific to COVID-19, how with Google and the pipeline that we've freely released, you have the ability to provide some level of data simulation in place to account for, end generation mutations forward. So super important when you're thinking about, now you've got this body of data, these experiments that you're putting together, and from an experiment perspective, you're really driving, the velocity in which you can drive a level of accuracy for the machine learning model that you've built. So again, I mentioned before, to really put this into context, historical data, where does your data come from? I'm going to build these slides up pretty quickly. Once you understand where the data is coming from, you're going to collect that data and put it into that data lake or data ocean I mentioned before. Once in that data lake or data ocean, you're going to provide your AI machine learning model against it. And from an AI machine learning model, you're going to result something, right? And from that something perspective, you're now going to go down that path of that fail fast technique. You have a hypothesis. You've got to build out your model very, very quickly. You've got to generate your experience. You've got to fail, and you've got to be able to help accelerate, right? Kind of that discovery. And from an acceleration perspective, this is where you really dive into identifying the best candidates to apply your model against. And from there, you're going to jump right into clinical trials. You're going to iterate on virus mutations and provide a level of predictability or simulation to account for virus mutations. And then, of course, you're going to go and run this process all over again until your model is at the level of accuracy that you're comfortable with. Now, to kind of put that into, how do I apply this into, the Googleverse, right, Franz? This is all great. I understand the research type process. What tools from Google can I really use to apply this data stack? Right at the high level, a very, very high level, these are the tools that you would leverage from the Google perspective out of the box to be able to build this model and help drive through that clinical or that research type process to get to that overall result. And again, towards the end, I'll give you the links and the scholarly information in terms of how you can simulate this model on your own or productionize it if you like, and really run through those functional tests to touch each of these components of Google, enable it into this environment, leverage the publicly and privately COVID-19 type data sets, and do some of these trial analyses on your own. And then maybe I pick out, 2 areas that would be super important to zero in on. One area would be BigQuery, and that area is going to be that massive data lake consolidation type engine. And think about BigQuery as that technology stack that gives you the ability to ingest data really from anywhere. Publicly available sources, CSVs, Excel files, data from other clouds like a Microsoft Azure or an Amazon Web Services, and so on. And as you go through the process, these 2 areas here really give you the ability to not just create a machine learning neural network, but a deep reinforcing machine learning neural network, right? So meaning that you now create this control system that learns, that has a concept of risk and reward, but also is able to provide future cast type simulations so you can predict things like viral mutations or predict things like, future fast fail type, error rates and think through quality. Okay? I mentioned before publicly available research data sets. So when you think about where the data sources have come from, we always encourage leverage data sources that are publicly available for you out there, right? But as you go through and you think through your bodies of work, your clinical repositories, really make sure that the data you're ingesting in the system is clean, and it's clean enough, and the data is in a point where you are constructing that model where you do challenge the model, right? Again, don't make it easy. Some other publicly available data sets, and again, I'll leave these links out here for you that we leverage today that you all can use. Johns Hopkins University data set from a COVID perspective, the National Institutes of Health, CDC, 500 Cities data has been a popular publicly available data set that a lot of my research institutions tend to leverage more often than not. What isn't on here, which I'll make adjustments to the slide before I send it off to you, is a technology stack called Google Colab, right? So Google Colab really gives you the opportunity to not just see and drive access into these publicly available data sets, but it has libraries in place and technologies in place where you can run an experimentation on your own as well and kind of think through before you even build out what that machine learning model is going to be, what technologies or what notebooks you can leverage, what bodies of work you can reference to be able to help build, you know, a very carefully crafted thought, right, or hypothesis before you build out the overall model. Okay. Just really operationalization. One of the speakers earlier today talked about really understanding and expanding your skill set. Python in this particular pipeline workspace is heavily used, right? So this is an example of leveraging our prediction simulator to be able to understand and really comb through virus mutations. And from a virus mutation, from a virus mutation perspective, there's another engine that I didn't touch called AutoML. So what AutoML is, in this example over here specifically showing is that if you have data and you're not sure what that machine learning model is going to look like, AutoML from a Google perspective is that no-code machine learning model. So you can fundamentally, and I'm going to oversimplify this, take your data, ingest it into the AutoML learning engine, and from an AutoML perspective, it'll run through experiments on its own based on the data that it sees and kind of result for you what it thinks a machine learning model, a baseline of a machine learning model could be. And not just one, it could be a series of 12 or 14 type of machine learning models, or 30. In certain instances, I've seen a couple hundred, right? But the intent there is to really, without having Python development experiments or being a data scientist or just really understanding, right, you know, or wanting to build a machine learning model, AutoML is a very easy approach to take. In fact, the data pipeline that I showed you all here earlier from a vaccine discovery perspective really used AutoML at the onset for many days before we worked into a custom model on its own. And a good example of that is, and I'll leave this link with you here, is University of Southern California, Berkeley. And from the USC perspective, they were looking for an ability to be able to find an opioid alternative, a synthetic opioid type drug. They were able to leverage AutoML and components of Google Cloud that I had mentioned here earlier to really go through the analysis of over 680 million or so compounds, drive that analysis in less than 24 hours, and come up with roughly 3 synthetic opioid alternatives. And the value to that is, right, is the acceleration of that discovery, but it also helped put them on path in terms of uniqueness around a model that they could build and perpetuate across the learning system. So to quickly scroll through, oops. I think I lost my presentation. While I wait for my presentation to come up, I'm coming towards the end. Here we go. I want to maybe touch on a couple areas of joint research collaboration. And from a joint research collaboration perspective, let me just change this real quick. And from a joint research collaboration perspective, you know, as an organization, again, as individuals, institutions, researchers, your bodies of work, right, I'd really like to make sure that you're aware of and have the ability to take advantage of some of the solutions and tools that Google has out there available to you all, as well as our ecosystem partners. And one of the large clinical research ecosystem partners that we have out there is Terra. And from a Terra perspective, they have data science notebooks that you can leverage from, again, capture this through a Google Colab, but these data science notebooks are bodies of work collected across the globe. And from a bodies of work perspective, really helps you create the foundation around some of the tests and some of the approaches that you can take as you think through your own bodies of work. Other areas that you can look at in terms of collaboration would be collaboration with other university institutions, right? So Google is very good at, and we like to enable cross-collaboration or collaborations between other healthcare systems, between other like-minded academic research systems, and also international. So towards the end, again, I'll share a couple scholarly articles where we partnered internationally to really accelerate the creation of some of these AI machine learning models that we've released publicly, but also released a lot of the Jupyter notebooks or a lot of the data science notebooks to continue these conversations forward and continue the discovery of bodies of work. I'm going to round it out with 2 slides here. One slide is, as you think about where your grant programs sit today, as you think about your bodies of research, right, I will definitely encourage you all to really capture Google research credits. So these research credits are available to everybody. And when you do look at some of the links that I'll provide with you, there are also special programs as part of these research credit type initiatives that are targeted to some of the more difficult problems the world is trying to solve, one of which is COVID. There are very specific cancer research data sets that are currently out there or programs. So as you think through, again, your bodies of work, right, your areas of study, I would encourage you to really take a look at the research credits that are available to you from a Google perspective. And as promised, here are some of the links that I'll provide for you, or I'll look to our friends here from Oakland University to share out. And what's really important about some of these links, folks, is it really, again, takes this COVID-19 vaccine pipeline, data pipeline that I shared with you earlier, but really show how that data pipeline is liftable and applicable to helping predict heart disease. So that same data pipeline with a publicly available data set can be used to predict heart disease, chronic kidney disease. I've included a hemorrhage detection option in there for you, an image analysis option in there for you. So there's a bunch of options that you can leverage to help advance some of your core bodies of work. I've also provided access or locations for GitHub. Most of the professional or highly focused research institutions that I work with, like your major healthcare systems like a Mayo Clinic or a Henry Ford Health Systems or others, their data scientists and their researchers will typically reference content and leverage data from GitHub or leverage data from Google Colab. So I wanted to help with some of your searching to, inside of GitHub and provide areas that you can start to really understand where you can get access to some of these data science notebooks I talked about, some of these publicly available data pipelines and data sets, and to help advance what you guys are doing today. And then lastly, you'll see some links here that I highlighted, which I think is super interesting and very beneficial, is something that Google had released here several years back called the COVID-19 Research Explorer. And this is really our use of techniques around natural language processing and natural language understanding to take all of the volumes of scholarly data articles out there across the globe, consolidate it into a single, call it searchable repository, and really surface up things for you to be able to help understand and reference into again, your bodies of work. So very, very quick, it'll surface up content across the organization, and it'll give you, output like this that's similar to Google search, but very focused on COVID-19 scholarly articles. You'll see links that really that tie you back to COVID-19 public data sets and what those data sets look like, and how you can access those data sets and apply to what you're doing. And then the last one that I'll leave with you, and I didn't give my friend Naresh here an opportunity to talk, is the ability to really activate your learning process with Google. Right, so we have this machine learning crash course that's really available to you all. It's about a 3-hour course to get you started around leveraging some of the tools from a Google perspective to help with, kind of inciting you know, that level of discovery. But also my friend Naresh here, you know, when our offices hopefully open up, we hold what we like to call machine learning garage sessions. And so from a machine learning garage session, it's a real kind of an intimate way, more close contact way to be able to help drive deeper machine learning education in a live classroom type setting for free, right? But it also gives you the opportunity to ask those live questions, touch and feel the tools, and take those tools home on whatever device you bring to the class, right? So we're going to try to hold those every month. And I'll share with our Oakland University friends here the schedule of classes, and I would encourage you to participate, right? These resources, these tools, these classes, they're freely available for you to use anytime.
Absolutely.
Folks, that's what I have, Naresh. I'm going to turn it over to you to close out, and certainly open for questions if anyone has any.
So I just wanted to add, thank you, Franz, for a great presentation here. So I'm Naresh, as Franz mentioned. I'm the AI/ML specialist in Detroit area. So I am available for you to ask any questions. Just one quick point. The TPUs is a special processor which Google has created and is available for you to for free to try it out on Google Colab. So Google Colab is an open source Jupyter notebook kind of a platform where you can use TPUs, the tensor processing unit, which are at least 2 times faster than your, even more faster than your GPUs. So from a processing speed and capability perspective, you have things to try out. And I am available. You can look me up, Franz, up on LinkedIn, and we are available for any kind of questions or any help you need. Thank you, Vijay, Franz.
Yeah, and thank you, Naresh. And just to really add on to what Naresh is saying, here's an example of Northeastern University, right? COVID-19 research program that does leverage heavily TPUs in the environment with a little over 5 petabytes of data. But what's important about them is from a research perspective, they're really looking at the socioeconomic impact of COVID. And they've been able to analyze and process a little over a billion sources of information to surface up their results that they've published publicly, and you can access those results through Google Data Studio. So, folks, the art of the possible. Hopefully this helps. Bobby, I'll turn it over.
Thank you. Thank you very much for sharing with us all these wonderful tools. It's very exciting to see all the possible collaborations that can happen. I think in the interest of time, we'll have to skip the questions, but we can move forward to our next